It is on between It Ends With Us co-stars Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Justin Baldoni, I believe, was one of the directors, producers of It Ends With Us, which was based on a book by Colleen Hoover. And Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni starred in it. And then as soon as the movie was out and they were doing all of this press to promote it, we were hearing the rumors that Blake Lively was difficult to work with. Then we were hearing that Justin Baldoni was incredibly difficult to work with. And then we learned that Blake Lively sued Justin for sexual harassment. And then now we're learning that Justin Baldoni is suing the New York Times for $250 million, saying this is a total smear campaign. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to unpack here. We do have our official attorney, Lisa Lanier, on the phone to kind of help us break it down and understand. Good morning, Lisa.
Hey, good morning. Happy New Year.
Hi, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, so first of all, I guess the rumor is Justin Baldoni, not rumor, he said, or somebody in his camp said he's going to release a bombshell countersuit either today or tomorrow or in the new year that will shock fans of Blake Lively. We'll see. And then the Blake Lively, okay, so can you break down the lawsuits between those two individuals against each other, and then also the one with the New York Times, and can they win?
Absolutely. So apparently Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively just did not get along on the set. And there were text messages that were shared with the New York Times, allegedly by the Blake Lively camp, and a narrative allegedly was sent to the New York Times. And from those text messages and that narrative, the Times did this story that paints Justin Baldoni in a very bad light, and other members too. There's actually 10 other plaintiffs that have joined him, and they've said, look, you took this out of context, you took Blake Lively's narrative, and you just basically used it to publish. And what they did was they published this article that basically says that it's something like you can ruin anyone in Hollywood with, a smear campaign, and basically they say that it was taken out of context. Baldoni says that none of it was really what was portrayed. And so he's suing, he and 10 other plaintiffs are suing the New York Times for libel and a bunch of other allegations, false light and all kinds of things. And they're seeking $250 million. They're saying the New York Times just absolutely went with the Blake Lively version of the story, didn't check the facts, didn't, get his side of the story, and it's very one-sided, and that it was just a tool for Blake Lively to get at him. She has also started a process that in California you have to start by going to this civil rights board with a sexual harassment complaint. That's what she's done. And it's more of a bare bones complaint, although it was 10 pages long, but it's not typically as many details as you see in the come out in the lawsuit. And so more is expected, but it's the first round. You have to get the approval of this Civil Rights Board in California before you can file your sexual harassment lawsuit. And so she's going through those steps right now. And then they've, the New York Times lawsuit by Justin Baldoni also, it doesn't make claims against Ryan Reynolds, but it paints him in a bad light, saying that he was very aggressively coming after Baldoni, claiming that he was fat-shaming Blake Lively, and that he just says it's all a big misunderstanding. And, he was saying, things like he has a back injury, apparently, Justin Baldoni. And so he asked, there's a scene where he's got to lift Blake Lively up in the air. And he asked, I don't know if he asked her or he asked her trainer or her doctor on set or somebody how much she weighed, not trying to fat shame her, but trying to make sure he could do the lift. And so things like that. Like they're saying, look, I wasn't trying to fat shame her. I was trying to make sure I don't hurt myself, And she just delivered a baby not long ago. She was still breastfeeding, and so she's going to naturally have a little extra weight on board probably from the pregnancy, and so he was just worried about that, according to him. According to her, he was terrible. It's like the opposite.
Right.
According to her, he was just terrible, and that he was fat shaming her, and that he was using very inappropriate sexual language, and that she claims that they even had to bring in this intimacy counselor to make sure that the sex scenes were done appropriately and without harm to either party. It was bizarre that it went to that level. But really, it's all going to, I think, come down. It's this big he said, she said thing. They have wildly different versions of what happened. Now he's claiming he has even more lurid things that he's going to come forward with. It just seems like they hated each other, and if you believe one versus the other, it's a completely radically different version of what happened. And so it's just going to have to play out with testimony and see what really happened here according to independent, unbiased witnesses.
And doesn't it?
Because
Sorry,
you can't trust either one of their versions of it
Right.
as truthful, because they're completely opposite of one another.
Well, and hearing when it first came out, because the movie, certainly among women who
It
read
did
the book.
very well.
Yes.
It made a lot of money.
Women who read the book.
Oh, yeah.
It was by a book by Colleen Hoover, and it was much anticipated, and then it did very, very well. And then it was like all of these things we were hearing about Blake Lively that I had never heard about,
No.
that she was horrible on set and she was a nightmare to work with. And we were like, what's going
Right.
on? Why all of a sudden? And it was like, they really just did not work well together.
but if Lisa, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of this stuff too is the wording. If he's saying or she's saying, she or he was horrible on set, that's almost like an opinion. Like so unless
Well, the horrible her accusations rise to the level of sexual harassment, that he was, that he was talking about her genitals and other women's genitals on set to them. I mean, very inappropriate things that he was saying. Not just that he was an ass, but just that he was sexually inappropriate.
I think he was also, because he's married and has children. And I think that at one point, Blake Lively said that he was asking her about different sexual things that she and Ryan Reynolds did in the bedroom, and
Right.
yeah, and like he would just come into her trailer and ask, and she was like,
While she was naked.
Yes,
I mean, he would
right.
come into her but then he claims that she sent him text messages that said, if you want to go over lines, I'm just in my trailer pumping, come on over.
Huh.
And so, he's
Pumping,
saying,
very sexual.
right, right. Well, he's saying, but so basically, he's saying, hey, look, she told me to come over at that time when she, and I'm sorry I came in and she was in there naked or whatever. I mean, it's basically a very much of a he said, she said, and that's an example from what he's saying of, look, they took this out of context. I didn't just show up to find her, hoping to find her naked in her trailer. She told me to come on over and go over the lines. So it's just a very he said, she said, and it really just, there's no way to predict who's going to win, who's right, without, really getting into the trial and seeing what independent people say about it. And finding somebody that's independent, truly independent, is going to be interesting, too, because everybody's taking sides. Everybody's got a side.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about with the New York Times? Because we've seen this more recently. A few years back, there was a teenager that I think sued, I can't remember, CNN, or it's one of the places. He was wearing a Trump hat, and they said he was being smug, and then it was like they got the story wrong. And he was just like, I was just
the
there.
Photo, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't
like,
it? Yeah.
And he was like there, and it was like Native Americans. It got like this really crazy story. And then he won like, I think over $100 million.
oh my gosh.
Or he sued for that amount, but he won. And then we've seen other people win these lawsuits against major news outlets. I mean, what do you think with the New York Times lawsuit?
Well, again, it's really just going to come down to, these very wild allegations and whether they're true or not. And, that's, again, testimony. He's saying, I mean, he can prove this. If it's from text messages, he's got his copy of the text message, right? And if the Times distorted, if they took information from those text messages or quotes out of context and presented them in a way that made it appear that he did something wrong, when really, if you read the whole exchange, he didn't, then they're in trouble, right?
Okay.
Because you can totally do that. I mean, you can totally take one little line out of a text message and make it look, or even a couple of lines, and if you don't have the what before and after, then it can be wildly different in terms of the meaning, and that's what he's claiming they did. And if he can prove that with his copies of the text messages, then they're in trouble.
Wow.
Yeah, I know specifically well about out of context things, and and you can certainly it could be anything. It could have been a conversation you just had before that you just heard and that was said to you, and then all of a sudden you write back maybe something that's a little triggered because of what just happened before, but that's the only thing that person's showing everybody else. There's no reason.
Right.
They don't show what the original either message before was, a conversation before was, or what happened. And that totally changes the picture. I know specifically, literally.
Literally.
I've been there too, where it's like, did you see all the stuff before? And then they're
Or
like,
said.
or said. They're like, do you see all the things let's just say, she said
Yeah.
before?
She
And they're
said,
like,
right.
oh
Right.
my gosh. And yeah.
Well,
Or-
we get it just being on the show,
Right.
too. I mean, not just
Yeah.
personally, but on the show where people will write to us
That's
and
true.
say, I can't believe you said blah, blah, blah. And you're like, but did you hear the whole thing?
Here's the
Because
part.
I
Katie
think
Right.
got raked over the coals. She said something about Britney Spears.
One time.
That she was acting out, which everyone agrees with now, out of control. That's the one time you weren't sexist, Katie. You missed something early. No. But I think you started with like, I love Britney Spears. I'm a huge fan of Britney Spears. But in this instance, this is insane.
And
they're
this
like,
was years ago.
and there's like this whole Britney fan page that was going after Katie.
Oh, yeah. Just like, could y'all just go to the site and listen to the whole thing? And then after, like, nobody says, oh, yeah, I listened to it. So
You were
sorry.
right. My bad.
Yeah.
And Lisa, another question too is with the New York Times thing too. It really matters the wording, how they say it. Like, are they say, is this the article that says he did this, or is it like allegedly this person is saying that he did this? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, you can get some mileage out of allegedly in terms of insulating yourself from, you are saying these things, but they still have an obligation to fact check. They still have an obligation to make sure that what they're reporting doesn't portray someone in a false light. And that's one of his big claims is, you've used factual information out of context to portray me in a false light. So allegedly if you're just, you are reporting something that has happened and you say, allegedly, this is what Blake Lively alleges, this is what Baldoni alleges, then you're pretty insulated if that's true that that's what's being alleged. But you still, as a huge, the New York Times, you still have an obligation to fact check. You still have an obligation to make sure you're not taking things out of context. Mm-hmm. And supposedly what they did was just ran with what she wrote them, which is interesting. If they did that, they may have a problem.
Yeah, and even if he is in some instances had bad behavior, I also read he claims that they didn't even give him time to respond. They said, all right, and we reached out to them, and then they printed the story like right away. There's no way for him to have time to respond. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be fascinating, and this is what I've said on the air many times, the knot of war. They probably didn't like each other on set. They probably could have settled it like, hey, we don't like each other. We're not going to work together anymore. I don't appreciate this behavior, and if it goes any further, blah, blah, blah. And then now they're both going to look bad, I think, because he's claiming he's going to throw out some apparently nasty allegations this week. So we'll see. I don't know if it's worth it. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I mean, if it's sexual harassment, then it is worth it. You need to speak up.
But if the sexual harassment, sexual harassment. So if the sexual harassment continues, meaning like, let's say she was not receptive to their flirting or whatever it was, and she's saying no, and she felt threatened in a sense, isn't there a criminal aspect? Yeah. Isn't there a criminal aspect to that as well?
She's not. I don't think she's saying that it rose to the level of a criminal aspect. And you can have like what they call quid pro quo sexual harassment, which I don't think is what she's claiming here. But that's where a superior is like, if you don't have sex with me, I'm going to fire you. And so that's like you're basically bartering sex for that person's continued employment. That I don't think is what she's alleging. I think it's more of a hostile work environment where like there have been cases of hostile work environment where like a woman works in, and this is just such a stereotype, I apologize to auto mechanics, but one of the cases that they teach in law school is, a woman works in an auto mechanic shop, and everywhere there's like pictures of nude women hanging in the shop, and they're saying to her, not like you have to have sex with me, but they're saying very sexual things to her like all day, every day. Then she sues, and because of all of the pinup girls all over the garage and all of the dirty jokes they're telling, and and that sort of thing, she wins because it's a hostile work environment. That's the kind of thing I think that Blake Lively is saying, is that he made all these inappropriate comments, and it made it very uncomfortable for women on the set.
Got you. It's fascinating. Thank you, Lisa, and we'll follow this story as it continues. Happy New Year. If you're ever injured on the job, contact her right away at hireaheavyweight.com.